Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. St. Lucia on monkeypox alert since 2 people on a flight tested positive. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Wednesday 29th June 2022. Details after this important message.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. The Health Ministry in St. Lucia is currently undertaking a tracing exercise to identify contacts of a crew member on a flight into St. Lucia who tested positive for monkeypox. Zane Romulus of the DBS News World reports.
The Epidemiology Department within the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs received an alert by the U.S. Centers of Disease Control and Prevention of a crew member on a flight which came into St. Lucia, and he has since tested positive for the monkeypox virus.
The crew member of that undisclosed flight did not disembark, says Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar George. The required contact tracing process, she says, is currently being undertaken by the contact tracing team within the Ministry of Health.
All identified contacts of the case shall be contacted by the Ministry of Health and placed in quarantine and monitored over a 21-day period.
With the significant increase in the number of cases of monkeypox which have been confirmed globally in recent weeks, St. Lucia has strengthened its capacity to manage suspected or confirmed cases. The protocols which are in place for COVID-19 have been modified to allow for the management of monkeypox.
Any person exposed to monkeypox shall be placed in quarantine and monitored by the home monitoring team of clinicians. The capacity for testing for monkeypox virus exists within the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and as such, samples will be taken from any individual who exhibits symptoms while in quarantine or isolation and shall be sent directly to CARFA for testing. The Victoria Hospital has assigned a dedicated ward exclusively for the care and management of anyone who receives a positive test result. The management of monkeypox is done by treating the symptoms, and there is the capacity in country to effectively undertake this. The public is reminded that monkeypox has not been confirmed in St. Lucia to date.
As a precautionary measure, the Ministry of Health requests that anyone with a recent travel history to self-monitor for the onset of flu-like symptoms, including fever, rash, headache, and muscle ache. If any of these symptoms are observed, medical attention should immediately be sought. For the DBS News World, I am Zane Romulus.
Likability or reluctance to change are just 2 of the several reasons that members may take into account when voting in an internal election. That's according to political scientist Mukesh Basdeo as he weighed in on the UNC's internal elections on Sunday. Here is more in this TV6 report with Melissa Maynard.
In light of opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar retaining her position as leader of the UNC, political scientist Mukesh Basdeo says that it takes a combination of psychological factors, including favoritism, that may determine a political leader's fate in an internal election. He was commenting on Persad-Bissessar's victory on TV6's morning edition.
What is also interesting is that Ms. Persad-Bissessar had put herself up as the political leader once again and announced a slate. Interestingly, we had 3 independent persons who did not run on a slate, who ran for individual positions. So what we can say is that it was an election primarily focused on the political leader of the party, more than there was no any other positions other than Dr. Glenn Ramadan Singh and Ramona Rambial. So some would have said from the outcome of the announcement of these persons challenging Ms. Persad-Bissessar and her slate of candidates that it would have been a foregone conclusion that the results would have gone in this way.
The political analyst says that the internal election results show that the membership maintains confidence in Persad-Bissessar. However, he believes that local government elections will be the benchmark to determine the opposition's leader's success in the 2025 general elections.
whether it could talk about in the context of the general electorate, which will include non-card carrying members who would vote in either way for political parties. That is another thing that we need to be, and that will be tested later this year when the local government elections are called. It is going to be what we call the yardstick to determine whether or not Ms. Prasad-Bissessar has what it takes to carry the party into, let's say, a general election.
Melissa Minard, TV6 News.
A major court ruling involving those criminally charged in connection with the construction of the Piarco International Airport. Monday, the Privy Council ruled there was apparent political bias at play, and it has quashed the decisions by Trinidad and Tobago's Court of Appeal. According to what legal sources are telling the Express newspaper, the state can now either hold a new inquiry or discontinue the charges against the defendants altogether. Anselm Gibbs of TV6 News reports.
The judgment from the Privy Council in the United Kingdom came on Monday morning. The lower lords finding there was apparent political bias involved in the court matter arising from the construction of the Piarco International Airport. In the ruling, the Privy Council said the late former Chief Magistrate Sherman McNichols should have recused himself from the Piarco 1 inquiry. The legal wording: the Court of Appeal erred by failing to hold that the test for apparent bias was satisfied and that recusal should have followed. Former Government Minister Russell Huggins, as well as businessmen and companies, were accused of multiple criminal offences linked to the construction of the airport. But the actual issue before the Privy Council was whether TNT's Court of Appeal should have found the Chief Magistrate's ruling was not impaired by the appearance of bias or by depriving appellants, now deceased John Smith and Barbara Gomes' right to due process and a fair hearing. The Privy Council has found, when all the various sources of concern are considered together, the observer would be likely to agree with the appellant's submission that by January 2008, the Chief Magistrate was hopelessly compromised. The ruling went on to say, given that everything was happening in the full glare of publicity, his mind must have been in turmoil. And for these reasons, the Privy Council has allowed both appeals and it has quashed the Court of Appeal's decisions. Monday's Privy Council ruling comes after Attorney General Reginald Amor and the Sequoia law firm were disqualified in another Piarco Airport matter before a Miami court. Anselm Gibbs, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
The time for Barbados and other regional destinations to develop sustainable and viable tourism destinations is now. More in this Barbados Today news item.
That's the view of Barbados' Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary with responsibility for climate change, SIDS and Law of the Sea, Elizabeth Thompson, who pointed to the impact of external shocks such as climate change. Addressing the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. second Visit Barbados Stakeholder Forum at the Lloyd's King Sandiford Center today, she said countries like Barbados had exhausted the luxury of time.
What is clear is that the imperative of sustainability and resilience of the tourism factor demand expeditious and in-depth study and action by tourism authorities. By virtue of our vulnerabilities, small island developing states such as Barbados have exhausted the luxury of time to undertake lengthy philosophical contemplations of what remedial or adaptive actions can be taken to counter climate impacts. We must now take action. We in the Caribbean, and indeed in CARICOM, are already too far behind in dealing with this phenomenon that is quite literally a matter of lives and livelihoods for us in this region.
Commonwealth Secretary General Patricia Scotland has defended a management of the financial affairs of the organization. Janella Precious of TVJ News reports.
In a terse response, Baroness Scotland described as a gross misrepresentation of the issues which were highlighted in the UK media about the audit report. She told journalists that when she took up office in 2016, the sums available to the Secretariat were insufficient to meet its needs, a way, she added, had to be found to ensure the organization remained viable.
We must be the most audited organization known to man, yet we have less than £42 million to do it all. So the question that was raised in 2018 by the leaders was, how do we put the Secretariat, who they said at that stage were doing a remarkably good job, on a more sustainable footing? That is the question that EY was asked to address. It was nothing about the financial circumstances of the Secretariat.
The period of reform started there. The Secretariat is obligated to publish data on every £500 and more which it spends.
That we have had a clean bill of health for every single year of my stewardship. And indeed, if you look at the governance measures, we moved from the Secretariat from a C-rated organisation to an A+. So we have been verifiably robust in the financial management.
The Baroness's term as Secretary General will come to an end in 2024. Reporting from the just concluded Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali, Rwanda, I'm Janella Precious for TVJ News.
The spanking new Grenadian Prime Minister proceeded on his first day of work as the country's newly elected Prime Minister on Monday. He used the opportunity to get familiar with the operatives within his ministry. He was seen to be touring his ministry and meeting the Cabinet Secretary, Permanent Secretary and other senior and junior staffers. One thing for sure is the new Prime Minister's gait and manner, which reek of humility and inclusiveness, as he believes in treating everyone equally and respectfully. Many are saying that based on the modus operandi of his predecessor, it would be well advised that he takes steps to reshuffle and resettle several of the leading civil servants, to include the Cabinet Secretary and his Permanent Secretary in particular, and install his own trustworthy personal assistant in order to avoid any similarity of developments during the 2008 to 2013 period of the Tillman Thomas-led NDC administration, which set itself up for sabotage, which rendered it paralyzed and somewhat dysfunctional. The appointment of a cabinet is expected in short order, and it is hoped that upon their swearing in, it would be time for the turning up of sleeves and getting down to the work at hand. Many influential citizens have planned to remain vigilant to guard this new administration from any likelihood of sabotage, which is likely to be on offer from the former administration, now main opposition, which is known to have many of the top-tier public servants beholden to them. Interestingly, several public servants who operated with impunity during the last dispensation are today feeling a sense of insecurity as they don't know where they stand in the food chain, according to some supporters of the new administration. Elected and appointed officials who operated as authority prior to June 23rd elections, which led to their defeat, are standing by with shouts of victimization at the tip of their tongues, should the new administration take all necessary steps to shore up its authority and block all possible avenues for leaks and sabotage. What some are saying is that the former administration must be reminded that they never held back in 2013 when they were re-elected to office, as the Cabinet Secretary and Commissioner of Police were the first two to be uprooted and removed, to the point where those developments ended in court, not to mention the countless others who were victimized and otherwise vulgarly frustrated throughout the entire public service. The Dickon Mitchell-led administration has its work cut out for it, as institutions have got to be rebuilt almost from scratch, and operatives within the service given renewed empowerment to operate by the rule book once more. But the integrity of the individual must be first restored so that he can rise to become trustworthy once more.
Hubbard's Motor Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies compound in Grandance, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.